And without further ado, most recently, Peter Marx served as the Chief Technology Officer for the City of Los Angeles, and he was also appointed by Mayor Eric Garcetti. He's held various senior leadership roles and a VP role over at Qualcomm Labs, Mattel, Universal Studios, and Peter now is the Executive Director and Evangelist Predix over at GE Digital. So please join me in welcoming Peter Marx.
I'm definitely not the first man, I'll just say that. So my name is Peter Marx. For the last 3 years, I was the Chief Technology Officer for the City of Los Angeles, working for Mayor Eric Garcetti. And one of the first things I learned actually working for the mayor's office is that you're supposed to mention the mayor's name 3 times in any talk. So, and we'll see whether we get to that quota. But one of the things that was really fascinating was that when I joined the city, and I spent a lot of time in the private world. I started off as a researcher here at UCLA in the School of Medicine, and then I went to go work for a fruit company called Apple Computer, and then wandered through a variety of small companies, startups, big companies, Universal Studios, Mattel, Qualcomm, and then I ended up in the city. And one of the interesting things that happened in the city under Mayor Garcetti, that's number 2, was that it was made abundantly clear under his and everyone's leadership that cities need to reflect the people who are in them. Los Angeles is 4 million people. And last time I looked, it was a really diverse city. In fact, I think it's the most diverse city in the country. And it's more than 50% women. And so under the mayor's leadership and everybody else, it was incredibly important that the city employee population and incredibly important that the city's leadership reflect, frankly, the city itself. And this is a new concept for me because in the private world, you don't really run into this, as we all know, right? And I'll just say that if you look across the deputy mayors and the directors and so on in the mayor's office, you look across the general managers of city departments and agencies, you look in transportation in Los Angeles, it's a very, very equitable place now. In fact, I would argue that Los Angeles is much better for it because what's happening is that we're seeing, perhaps it's too strong a term, but I'll say that we've seen a humanizing, if you will, element to a lot of things. And I'll point to things like Vision Zero, which is the Department of Transportation's goal to reduce serious injuries and traffic fatalities to 0, because the transportation system really shouldn't be so dangerous, right? If you think about just crossing the street, think of an elderly person trying to cross Olympic Boulevard or something like that. It's a little bit, I can say it now that I'm out of the public world, just having grown up here, it's not an easy thing to contemplate doing, right? And so to have transportation, which by the way is led by Salita Reynolds, become a safer thing is something that really, is again, not just because she's a woman, but it's very important to all of us, including families and moms and, daughters of elderly relatives, elderly parents. And then I'll just go and say that if you look inside of any city departments, you'll see that in fact there are intelligent, competent, well-educated, strong leaders who happen to be women leading change across the city. And I can point into even the most alpha male departments, the fire departments, the police departments. There are strong people who are really leading change and innovation. And so I'll just say one other thing, which is that when I decided that I wanted to leave the mayor's office, I called up a friend of mine and said, so how do I do this? I've never left a public job before. And, because you don't, when you're leaving a private job, you sort of call you call your spouse or you tell your parents that, hey, I got a new job. And that's kind of the end of it, right? But when you're in a public position, they write newspaper articles about you. And you don't want those you really don't want those newspaper articles, but you want something that is neutral. In fact, you want to leave the place in a better condition than what you found. And so what my advisor said was something interesting. Well, you know how to do this, Peter. You just have to find somebody who is better than you are, somebody who is, can continue at least some of the work that you're doing, but in addition, build upon it, take it in new directions, leave the house in a better shape. And then Gene Holm called me, and which I thought was very fortunate. And so Gene, came to us from the city of Los Angeles after a number of years working for the Jet Propulsion Lab. It turned out that I did my degrees here at UCLA. I did an English degree, I did a biology degree, then I went off and left grad school to go work in the computer world. But one of the funny things is that, of course, Gene also happened to do a biology degree and an English degree. And, which is not that common, right? North and South Campus don't really mix here. And so, and not only that, but she had a wealth of experience. She, if you will, it's not so much that it's one of those things where you go and say, okay, I need to have somebody who is my clone, if you will, as it is important to be able to go and have a similar perspective on the world. And I'll just give a little tout towards UCLA, a big public university. This is not an easy place to go to school. It's not an easy place to teach. It's not an easy place to be a researcher. We all know that, right? Because it's a very big competitive space. And when you go into these big private companies, or even if you do a startup, if you go into government, none of these places are easy, right? They're competitive. They all have their strands. They all have their threads. In the city governments, the biggest issue is that, look, it's a big bureaucracy, 53,000 people. And it's not designed for change. It's designed to run a city. And then in the midst of this, we have elected offices, Mayor Garcetti, for example, who is very much a dynamic leader who wants to go and leave the city in a better place. And so when you bring in somebody, you have to find somebody who not only can go and deal with the complexity and the challenges and everything else, but also to deal with the change. And there's nowhere that there's more change than there is in technology. And I'll just say that when it comes to something like this, what we're watching is that we're watching change happen across all of our society. 10 years ago, none of us were taking an Uber or a Lyft. None of us were using Airbnb. Not even that many of us were using Google as many times a day as we do now, right? And so we're seeing a tremendous amount of change, even in places which, frankly, aren't designed to change, like the city itself. And so finding Jean was really a good thing, because not only has she handled change, and she'll talk, I think, a little bit about the stuff that she did at NASA and at the White House, starting the open data movement, which is something that's gone across the entire country. She's the high priestess, the high saint of open data. And fostering change, in big complicated organizations is a really tremendous thing. And to a certain degree, that's our opportunity when it comes to tech, because we're seeing these changing norms of behavior, and that opens up opportunities, I think, for everybody. And so with that, let me introduce Jane. Thank you so much.